So our church has a new website, which is awesome. We're excited about it. Yeah. So this has been a labor of love for a long time, and BCC exists to love our community and invite them into a life-changing relationship with Jesus, because we, as Jesus followers, know from experience that with Jesus, better is possible. You have access to a better community in the church that's based on the love of Jesus. You have access to a better life that is defined by love and joy and peace and rest, which is what we're going to talk about today. And you have access to a better purpose, because when you experience the better that Jesus gives you, you just want to share it with other people. And so that's what the website's all about. It's a tool for all of us to use as we talk to our neighbors and our coworkers, our family and our friends about who Jesus is to us and what this church has done for us in our lives. And so I'd really love it if you would, at some point this week, go onto the website, bridgetownchurch.com, click the button, see what they do, and then share it with a friend. Now, some of you might be new here. Maybe this is your first time. Maybe this is your second time, whatever. Maybe somebody invited you, even without a website, to do so. Or maybe you just came on your own. What we want to say right at the front is welcome. We are humbled and excited that you would choose to spend some time with us here today. So welcome. My name's Eric. I'm one of the ministers here, part of the teaching team. If you are new here, though, I've got to kind of fill you in on what's happened here over the last few weeks, just so that you can kind of see where we're going today. So BCC is at the beginning of a new era. Our senior minister of the last 15 years, last week, was his last week, which is why we had a big party to celebrate him and his family and all that they've done and contributed to this community over the last 15 years. We ate fried chicken, and we had water slides, and the kids were going down them. It was a lot of fun. If you weren't here, you missed out. But at the end of every chapter, after you celebrate the accomplishments and the victories, after the laughter and the memories, after you throw a cap up in the air, after you run through the gauntlet of your friends throwing rice at you, or blowing bubbles, which is more appropriate these days, right? After you blow out the candles of another year, after the tears dry on your face from looking at that newborn baby for the first time, after your car pulls away from the college, leaving that precious one behind to fend for themselves, or after seeing that car pull away and you feel that initial rush of freedom, at the end of every chapter, a question starts to form in your mind. What now? What now? Where do we go from here? Our church has just entered what Margaret Feinberg calls the in-between, and this is what she writes about it. There's a place between here and there, a piece of ground in the middle of takeoff and landing. A section of unknown within the beginning and the ending. You probably find yourself there from time to time. In between is one of the most rugged places in life. You aren't fully here, and you aren't fully there. Your emotions and hopes are strewn across an endless list of possibilities. Doorknobs of wood, brass, and silver line the path, but which will open? Excitement runs forward, but fears hold back. And if you stay long enough, you will feel the tremors of your soul. I love that line, but it sounds so ominous. The tremors of your soul, right? And when you're in between, there's something that you know behind you. There's something comfortable, something that feels right or like home. And there's something unknowable in front of you that you just can't know. And so you're stuck there, and you have to ask the question, what now? And so for some of us in this church, Maybe that endless list of possibilities elicits some excitement in you. Like maybe this is an opportunity for us as a church to reinvigorate or reimagine our vision, our place here in this community. And for some of us, it might elicit some fear. Like, who are the elders going to hire? How long are we going to be here? What if I don't like that person? What if I don't like the direction? What if I have to find a new church home? These are all natural and normal questions of the in-between. But if you're anything like me, this isn't the only thing that's happening in your life, right? Some of us have been scouring the internet, the news sites for the past 6 months trying to figure out what's going to happen in an election that's still over a year away, right? Or maybe some of us are more concerned with the decidedly lackluster performance of the NFL's highest paid athlete last week. And we're asking the question, what now? What are we going to do about this, as if we could do anything about it, right? Students, you might be just a few weeks into the school year, and you might be excited. Hey, maybe this is the year that I'm going to get straight A's. Or maybe you're a little bit afraid that teacher already hates you and has already failed you for the year, right? For some of us, it might have to do with a job. Maybe you got a new job. Maybe you got a promotion. Maybe you lost a job. Or maybe you're retired, sitting at home doing crossword puzzles every day, and you hate crossword puzzles, and you're like, what now? Or maybe you're dealing with aging parents or the death of a loved one. Or maybe you're just coming to terms with your own mortality and you're asking, what now? Where do we go? When you're in the in-between, there's what you know and there's what you don't know. And none of us like that unknowable future. And so a lot of times when we're in between, what we try to do is we try to make sense of it all. We try to control something. And so sometimes that looks like working really hard, trying to find the shortcuts to what's next. And sometimes that's just trying to live in the past and stay here for a while. But sometimes, more often than not, for me, it's just disengaging in the reality of my situation. And that's really easy to do in a culture where your attention is a commodity that's bought and sold on the open market, right? It's easy to distract ourselves with Facebook or Twitter or whatever it's called now, Netflix or even work, or just isolating ourselves from everybody and just holding up and just trying to imagine that we're not in between. And so what now? Today we're going to talk about a story that's found in a book called Exodus in the Bible. And if you were here last week, you would have seen some of our students do a phenomenal job of telling the end of that story. Like, it was amazing. If you weren't here, you missed it. I'm sorry, you missed it. It was great. But even if you weren't here last week, you probably know some of this story at least, because it's like one of the Bible's greatest hits, right? More movies have been made about this story than any other story in the Bible except for Jesus, okay? Put that aside, but it's like the second most told story in the Bible. And so, but just as a refresher, it starts off with the Israelites in slavery. They're in the land of Egypt, and they have to make bricks for the Egyptian store cities where they store all of their vast wealth. And God looks down and he says, I'm going to rescue the Israelites. I'm going to get them out of there. So he comes down and he finds Charlton Heston, or Moses, Moses, right? He tells him to take his shoes off and go to Pharaoh and tell him, hey, let my people go. Now you can imagine Pharaoh is not a fan of this plan. Like, he doesn't want to let his slave labor go. But God sends the 10 plagues, and Pharaoh is convinced. So the Israelites start on their way. But as soon as they start on their way, Pharaoh changes his mind again. He sends the Egyptian army after them. And so there's this scene where the Israelites are in between this Egyptian army behind them and the Red Sea. And so it looks hopeless. They're like, what now? But God comes down and he splits the Red Sea in half. And the Israelites walk through on dry ground. I don't know why I'm doing that. I don't know why. I guess that's how you walk through the Red Sea, right? And so they're walking through the Red Sea, and they get to the other side, and the Egyptian army comes in. Is this sounding familiar? Yeah, the Egyptian army comes in, and God closes the Red Sea over them. The Egyptian army drowns, and the Israelites are on the other shore dancing and singing. And you can find the song in chapter 15 of Exodus. But at the end of every chapter, after you've celebrated the victories and the accomplishments, after that initial rush of freedom, a question starts to form in your mind. What now? The Israelites had entered the in-between. So they continue on through the wilderness, and they hike for about 3 days, and they run out of water. And they come across a stream, but they can't drink the water of the stream because it's bitter, right? And so they're like, go to Moses, and they say, why are we in the wilderness again? We're going to die here. We don't have water. We need water to survive. What are we going to do? And in that moment, God comes down and he makes the water sweet so they can drink it. Right? He says, I'm here. I'm going to take you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take you through the in-between. So they travel on and they come to a place where they don't have any food. The in-between is an uncomfortable place. They're like, we're going to die here again, right? They go to Moses and they say, why did you bring us out into the wilderness? We don't know how to survive in the wilderness. We're brick makers, not Bear Grylls, right? We don't know what to do. But God comes down and he provides food for them. He makes bread come up from the ground, right? But when he does this, he does something that I've always thought was strange. He tells the Israelites, gather the food for 6 days, but on the 7th day, don't do any work. Don't go out and gather the food on the 7th day. This is the first time that God institutes something called the Sabbath, a day of rest, right? And he says, don't work on that day. And it's always confused me because this Sabbath thing becomes a big deal throughout the Old Testament. If you read the Old Testament, it just comes up over and over and over again. It's the sign of the covenant. It makes Israelites holy, right? And God institutes this thing. It's even in the Ten Commandments. Let me read to you the first 4 commandments. God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to your Lord, your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, and it kind of goes on and tells all the people that shouldn't do work on the Sabbath day, right? So the first 4 commandments, let me recap them for you. 1 God, no idols, don't take God's name in vain, take a day off, right? Why is that a commandment? Why does God tell his people to take a day off? Well, he explains it a little bit in verse 11. It says this, for in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now in Deuteronomy, it repeats the 10 commandments, okay? But there, Moses gives a little bit of a different reason why, it's kind of connected, but he gives a little bit of a different reason why they should observe the Sabbath. And this is what it says. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So the Sabbath has something to do with remembering, okay? Because remember, when you're in the in-between, there's something that you know. And so what God is saying to the Israelites is, you need to remember what you know to be true. You need to remember correctly what you know. And so he starts off with the creation account. He says, the Lord rested on the seventh day. And so we're going to jump over to the first page of the Bible. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's one God, okay? Genesis 1:27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Now, John Walton, an Old Testament scholar that knows more than I will ever know about the Old Testament, says that we've interpreted this idea that we were made in the image of God in lots of different ways over the centuries, right? Some people have said the image of God means like we look like God kind of somehow. Some people have said that it might be like a spark of creativity or reason. But what John Walton says is he thinks that in the ancient Near Eastern mindset, there is images of a deity or of a king where they're representatives. And so God is putting his image in humanity, so we are his representatives here on earth. And here's the thing, most of the time, when deities were represented here on earth, it was through a carved statue that we call an idol. And so we are not to have any idols because God already has a representation of him here on earth. And that's humanity. So let's keep going. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And so here God is giving us dominion or something to do. He's giving us work. He's inviting us into something that he really is in charge of. He has dominion over all the birds of the air. I almost said birds of the sea. He has dominion over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea and everything that moves on the earth, right? But he invites us as his representatives to step into his work. And so the third command is don't take the Lord's name in vain. And a lot of times we think that means something about swearing or something like that. But what it really means is when we take God's name upon ourselves, we should represent him well. We shouldn't take his name upon ourselves and do something that he wouldn't do. And so we are to step into his work and not take his name in vain. And so then in chapter 2 through 3, it says that God rested on the seventh day. And so as God's representatives here on earth, we are to step into his work and to step into his rest. And so the whole idea here is that God is coming down and he's telling the Israelites to do this Sabbath thing so that they can remember rightly not just who they are as representatives of God here to step into his work and to step into his rest, but also to remember who he is and what he has done. God is saying, I've been with you this whole time. I'm here. If you remember, you can trust me. And you can engage in my work and you can engage in my rest because I'm the God that released you from the grip of Pharaoh. I'm the God that got you through the Red Sea. I'm the God that can get you through the wilderness. If you just remember and trust and engage. And I think he's saying the same thing to us today. If we can remember who we are, God's representatives here on earth, to step into his work and into his rest. If we can remember who he is and how far he's brought this place, this community, we don't have to worry about what's ahead of us. We can just trust and rest in his provision and in his grace. The in-between doesn't have to be so scary because he's got us. We've experienced healing in this place. We have experienced relationships restored. We've experienced answered prayers. God has been preparing us for this moment for a very, very long time. And we just need to remember and trust and engage in the work and the rest that he has for us. See, the tragedy of the Old Testament, if you read it, is that God keeps saying over and over and over again, I'm here. You can trust me. I'll get you through. I'm with you. And over and over and over again, the Israelites miss it. He says, I'm here when he provides the water to drink. I'm here when he provides the bread to eat. And if you just read Exodus, you'll see it. He's like, I'm here in the pillar of fire. I'm here in the pillar of cloud. I'm here in the thunder on the mountaintop. I'm here in the glory on Moses' face. I'm here in the tent of meeting. I'm here in the tabernacle. And they miss it over and over again. I don't want to miss it. I don't know why they missed it, but I know why I miss it all the time. I miss it because I'm too busy trying to get to the next thing. Or I miss it because I'm too busy trying to live in the past. But more often than not, it's because I'm disengaged, because I'm isolating myself, because I'm scrolling on Facebook instead of reaching out to a friend. I miss it all the time because I don't remember, because I don't trust, because I don't engage. I don't step into God's work, and I don't step into his rest enough. And I don't want to miss it. Do you? I hope not. But here's the thing, like this, the story keeps going. He says, I'm here with you, and they miss it not just in the wilderness, they miss it in the promised land. And so when they get kicked out of the promised land for not stepping into God's work and not stepping into his rest, they miss it in the exile. And then God sends Jesus, who is called Emmanuel, God with us, and we missed it, and we killed him. And what's amazing is that Jesus didn't stay dead. Like, he broke death. Like the thing that we were scared of in the wilderness, when we didn't have water, when we didn't have food, when we said, hey, send us back into slavery in Egypt. When we were afraid of the death that we might face in the wilderness, Jesus broke it. And so we have nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear in the in-between because Jesus is here. And because if we remember rightly what he's done, we will remember that death is no longer a thing that can harm us. When we can do that, when we can remember correctly, when we can trust, and when we can engage, we become holy. Now, when I say holy, I don't want you to hear a churchy person. Holy is another word for weird. It's another word for different. It's another word for set apart. So when we can remember and when we can trust and when we can engage, we can become what Mark Sayers calls a non-anxious presence in a world filled with restlessness and anxiety. In a world filled with restlessness and anxiety, don't you want to be weird? And here's the thing, like when I say this, I know that half of you are probably saying, well, that sounds great. I'd love to do that, right? But is that even possible? Yes. Yes. With Jesus, better is possible. We have access to a better life, one that's founded on love and joy and peace and rest. It is possible. And so I've often struggled with why God would institute this practice of Sabbath for the Israelites. Like, why would he do that? And here's why I think it is. It's hard to remember correctly. It's hard to remember that we are God's representatives here on earth, to step into his work and to step into his rest, to remember that he has brought us through the Red Sea and he can bring us through the in-between, right? It's hard to remember. But God knows that the best way to remember something is to practice it. And so he gave them a practice so that they could practice remembering, so that they could practice trusting and practice stepping into his rest. And so for us, I think what that means is we need to practice it. We need to put it into practice, trusting and resting and engaging and remembering. And so there's several different ways that we can do this. And in fact, there's like thousands of ways we can do this. I've got a few that I'm going to share with you. I'm not going to go into the whole list because we'd be here forever. But the first one would be just to practice Sabbath. Now, to be clear, Colossians 2:16 through 17 says we don't have to do this anymore. Like, this was fulfilled through Jesus. It's not something that we have to do, but it is still a useful practice that we can use to help us to remember that God is in control, to enter into his rest and enter into trust in him. My family has been trying to do this for the past few weeks, and I can tell you, it's really hard. It's really hard to take a day and just set it aside. And so if you want to do this, we've put together a little quick start guide on the next page at bridgetownchurch.com/next. And so you can go there and you can kind of read through it and maybe pick some practices that you can do as a family to practice Sabbath. But I will say, start where you are, not where you want to be. So don't start with a whole day. Maybe start with a couple hours on a Saturday, or like a half a day or something like that. Another practice that we can use is silent praying. And what I mean by that is just sitting in God's presence for a certain amount of time. Not going through your prayer list, not going through your daily activities, but just trying to focus your attention on the presence of God, because he's here and you don't want to miss it, right? Again, start where you are, not where you want to be. They say that a good practice for this is maybe 20 minutes. I can't do 20 minutes. So start with a minute. Start with a minute of silence in God's presence. But then the third thing is to just not disengage, to engage in what God is doing here in this community, here in this place. It's easy in the in-between to just kind of hold back, see what happens. Stop tithing, stop participating, just kind of to wait and see. But what I found as I've been studying Exodus is that God doesn't wait for the promised land to be there with us. He's here with us. And if you wait until the something to come, whatever that is, you'll miss it. And so we've got lots of ways that you can engage in the community here. One would be, if you're a student, come to BCSM at night tonight, 5:30 to 7. That's 70 tonight, so wear your bell bottoms. It's going to be great. If you're in small groups, one of the best ways that we can practice trusting God is by trusting other people, because we know that other people will let us down. And if we are vulnerable with them, but we have our hope fixed on Jesus, we don't have to worry about them letting us down. We can pour ourselves out for them and rest in his provision and his grace and his friendship and his relationship to sustain us. So if you're in small groups, just as you enter into the small group season, just make a commitment to engage and to be present for those small group sessions, to answer the questions openly and honestly, to trust yourself to those people. But if you're new here, or maybe you're not involved in a small group this session, maybe another first step or another next step would just be on October 13th. We're having a campfire out here on the lawn. We're going to roast some hot dogs, s'mores, that kind of thing. It's going to be a fun time. One of the first steps towards vulnerability and trust in a relationship is knowing someone's name. So just come to that, meet somebody new, find out somebody else's name, connect to this community a little bit more. But Jesus gave us a practice to do this very same thing. God's in the habit of establishing practices that help us to remember who he is and to remember who we are. And so we're going to do that right now. If you've not picked up your communion packet, you can go ahead and grab one. They're on the table in the back. And if that's you, don't worry about it. Last week I had to do the same thing. I totally forgot. But God is in the habit of establishing practices to remind us who he is, to help us remember and to trust and to engage. And he did that same thing when he instituted communion. Would you go ahead and open up the bread side of your packet? The bread is here to remind us that Jesus provided a way for us when death seemed certain. He broke death for us. When we wanted to run back to Egypt, into the slavery of sin, he called us to eat and remember. The juice reminds us of the blood that he spilled to enter into our wilderness, our suffering and our death, so we can enter into his life and his abundance. To make it possible to enter into the promised land later, but even now, in his presence. He called us to drink and remember. And we do this together to remember that we are not alone on this journey. Not only is God with us, but other people in this room are with us as well. So may we as a church, or you individually, may you trust him as we enter a season of uncertainty and change. One that sits on top of the brokenness and restlessness that is already a part of our world and our culture right now. And may we continue to proclaim the good news of Jesus to the community that surrounds us by intentionally resting in the truth of the gospel, becoming different, holy, non-anxious presences in this restless world. Let me end with this. I don't know what is to come. I don't know what is to be, but I am excited. I am confident that if we can remember and trust him in this land of in-between, God has some amazing things in store for us, for this family, for this community, and for you. I am excited to see his plans be made real in this church and in our lives. And I really don't want you to miss it. So remember, trust, engage. He will not fail us.